Hi, my name is Audrey King, and I'm a second-year PhD student at Oklahoma State University. And I'm excited to share some research with you today regarding agricultural producer identity that I worked on with my major professor, Dr. Kisto Settle. This study is entitled Cultivating Identity, Sowing Relationships, Fertilizing, Success, and Harvesting Coexistence, Understanding Oklahoma Producer Identity and Relationships. It has been found that agricultural producers have a deep sense of identity, and that identity actually affects the agricultural decisions that they make, and producers are encouraged to build relationships with the public. However, few studies have focused on understanding the relationships between producers of different agricultural sectors. And because niche and mainstream producers tend to pick the radical examples of problematic practices to show and display, it creates a very large chasm between those two groups of producers, and that can be exacerbated by the declining rural population as well as economic factors. Farmers wanted to be identified and viewed as a good farmer, but the definition of good varied from producer to producer and from study to study. This study was intended to explore producers' descriptions of their own identity in agricultural communities through the lens of the communication theory of identity. The first research question was, what are major components of how producers describe their identity? Research question 2 was, how do producers define a good farmer? And research question 3 was, how do producers relate to and share information with others? To examine the research questions, 13 semi-structured in-person interviews were conducted throughout the state in the summer of 2019. The producers were asked questions regarding their operations, the history of those operations, their perceptions of others, their relationships with others, and their own definition of success. Transcripts were analyzed using Glazer's constant comparative method. Next, we'll talk about results. When it came to major components of farmers' identity, the occupation of farming was a major component. Farmers often talked about how they could only see themselves farming and that farming was something they felt truly called to do. Family ties also contributed to a producer's identity. Some producers felt as though they owed it to their family and to their heritage to continue to farm. A connection and duty to the land was another major component of farmer identity. Many farmers stated that they felt they were placed on this earth to care for the land. Another interesting component of farmer identity was this idea of hard work. Producers were quick to talk about how hardworking they were, as well as their peers. Social self-consciousness and perceived vilification was an interesting component of farmer identity. Producers were very socially conscious. They did not want to be seen as speaking negatively about their neighbors or peers. However, they did feel as though they were being vilified by others, particularly the media. One producer said, "I never imagined that I would be perceived as the bad guy." When producers were asked to define success, some mentioned the idea of innovation and efficiency. However, some talked about farm succession as the evidence of success. Others talked about passion and joy as the measurement of success. But a lot also talked about how important profits were for success. Next, we'll talk about producer relationships. Some were very positive and talked a lot about an idea of a healthy competition, while other relationships were quite negative. Some producers were certain that they were the object of gossip down at the co-op amongst other producers, but the overarching component of this producer relationship theme was a general support of other producers. People really just wanted to get along with one another. One of the things that many producers mentioned during interviews was a concern for mental health of all producers. There were also strong producer networks that were mentioned by producers. Most producers had other agriculturalists that they could talk to or even tweet to, as social media was a very strong component here. Moreover, there was another very interesting component of mentoring happening here. Older producers were very keen on making sure that the next generation of agriculture would be supported. Some producers were going so far in these mentoring relationships as supporting young farmers financially to ensure their success. The results from this study support previous findings regarding producer identity and varying definitions of being a good farmer. Producers were supportive of other farmers' decisions, even if it were not a decisions that they would have made themselves. There was a mutual respect of, I won't tell them how to farm, but I also don't want to be told how to farm. Although every farmer in the study stated the same mutual respect, they also thought that perhaps that did not go both ways. So therefore, the perceptions of these relationships remain strained, and that can be very problematic. It is recommended that this study be repeated in other states. It would also be interesting to examine producer social media usage regarding this networking piece. Thanks for tuning in for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to read some wonderful quotes from some great producers, please see my full manuscript. And if you have questions, feel free to contact me via email.